There we go. Welcome. Welcome to this SteinerBooks Zoom webinar. It's Good Friday, April 15th, 2022. I'm pleased to welcome Peter Selg to speak today about his most recent SteinerBooks publication, After Auschwitz: Reflections on the Future of Medicine. The presentation will be about an hour, and because of the late hour in Switzerland, we won't be taking questions afterwards. So, but I think that should be okay, given the day. Peter Selg is the director of the Ida Wegmann Institute for Basic Research into Anthroposophy in Arlesheim, Switzerland. He's a professor of medicine at the Elena University of Arts and Social Sciences in Germany, and co-leader of the General Anthroposophical Section of the School of Spiritual Science at the Goetheanum. And he's the author of numerous books and a great friend of ours, and we're pleased to have him this evening. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, John Scott, and thank you all for joining this evening. Here in Middle Europe, it's approaching midnight on this very, very special day, in a way partly maybe fitting to our theme. Thank you also for joining, because it's not such an anthroposophical theme we usually want to join. I personally come out of a conference we have at the Goetheanum about the class lessons, the 19 class lessons in one week. I had a kind of a study group, working group about the hierarchies in the class lessons. But also in the class lessons, the problem of evil is one of the most tremendous challenges of our time at all. And I think in a way it's good to concentrate tonight, or partly fitting, I would even say, to the state Good Friday, as it's called in English, Karfreitag, as we say in German. Just considering that from Dr. Steiner's description, it was the main purpose of the Christ entity to undergo the death, the Ahrimanic death on earth, because death, and especially Ahrimanic death, was not known in the heavens. So there was a sacrifice needed in a way to understand what is going on earth, considering Ahriman, and especially the problem of death. And as Dr. Steiner said to the priests, especially after a question of Friedrich Hittelmeier of the Christian community, it was a fight over 3 days. At the end, Christ overcame this Ahrimanic death. So it was not just dying and then being resurrected, but it was a process. And so in this Good Friday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the death occurred at the turning point of time. And now we're talking about a locus, a site on earth, Auschwitz-Birkenau, the concentration camp, the death camp, the extermination camp, where a kind of Ahrimanic death was practiced, but never before on earth. So in contrast to this type of dying, Ahrimanic dying, the death form, only the outer form of Golgotha, was maybe closer to human being. So in a way, in those 2000 of years, Ahriman proceeded, at least on the level of extermination of human beings. So, as I said, when John Scott Legg and me discussed about a possible date for this presentation of the book, at the end we came to this date. After quite a long day here, but I hope that I'm able to present the book. And when he asked me questions at the end, I hesitated a little bit. But maybe we can also change and say, it's good. I'll see. First of all, I want to thank John Scott Legg and the SteinerBooks as publishers and Jeff Martin as translator, that they brought this book into the English-speaking world. And I would appreciate very much if we get the possibility to bring it really to the world, not only to our anthroposophical community, but to the bigger world. Before COVID, 1.5 million people visited Auschwitz-Birkenau every year. This is insofar also astonishing because it's almost the estimated figure of people who died there, almost 1.5 million. So it is not at all balanced now by the visitors, but it is a matter of fact that they come. There is a lot to say about visiting Auschwitz-Birkenau, and there is also partially a kind of tourism. But on the other side, I always see these faces of people there, visitors. I always think they won't go home unchanged. And in a way, it would be helpful if they all get the book. Unfortunately, they are not all readers. And unfortunately, the book won't be so present there, even if they have a bookshop there. But just to say, coming back to my grateful words, saying it was a wonderful decision to take this book into the publishing house, and that they found Jeff Martin as a translator. And it's really well done. Also from the, how to say, from the cover till the inside. And also the decision to take a quotation of Timothy Snyder just on the cover page, which was originally in the book, but now it's really outside. This quotation, history does not repeat, but it does instruct. And then if you open the book, hopefully some of you did already or will do afterwards, there is another quotation by a kind of a famous historian of medicine, Michael Carter, I think from Canada. It was almost the first one who really published a well-researched book about doctors under Hitler. The quotation is, and it's coming, I think, after the last 2 years, and maybe since longer time, it can come close to our heart, this quotation, because it's more a question. He's saying it is a legitimate question whether the crisis of the medical profession and medicine under Hitler, the worst excesses of which were revealed in the Nuremberg doctor's trial, had a healing effect on healthcare in the modern world. So in a way, he's doubting if there is a healing effect until now. The history of the book is quite simple. I'll go to this place, Auschwitz-Birkenau, since 2009, regularly, mostly every second year, with medical students of the University of Wittenherdecke. They all become doctors. And we offer this kind of seminar 4 days in Auschwitz-Birkenau about medical ethics. And when I started this initiative, I was astonished that so many of these young students decided to come with us. Sometimes in some years we had not enough capacity to take them all with us, because there is a kind of a limited size of the group, but 50 students were able to come with us. And it is in a way an astonishing decision for those young students to go to such a horrible place by their own free will. And if you want to study medicine, maybe it's not the first choice to go to Auschwitz-Birkenau, and they are quite at the beginning of their studies. I'm always living there together with a friend of mine who is the leading historian, Polish historian of the digital archive of the memorial site Auschwitz-Birkenau. Krzysztof Antończyk is his name. I'm always living with him in his family, Polish family, when I'm there, and he is married with a pediatrician, Polish pediatrician, and she's always looking forward to my next visit, but always posing the same question. Peter, why do you think that medical students get something for their medical studies in Auschwitz-Birkenau? So she's living nearby, 20 kilometers, and her husband, Krzysztof, is one of the responsible staff members, but until now she's still questioning if there is a sense of visiting Auschwitz-Birkenau with medical students. I always try to explain her why we come. Yeah. And since 2009, I had always this feeling that we do something quite important. To be honest, this year, 4 weeks ago, it was the first time I was a little bit unsure. I came not with the medical students, but with doctors, with a group of anthroposophical doctors and therapists, around 30 of them. And it was just 2 weeks after the war in Ukraine started. And in a way, it made no sense for me to go to a memorial site where the war is so close. So studying history instead of presence, or also with doctors, is there not another need for doctors where help is needed instead of memorizing? I was really unsure if it makes sense. And we had a guest speaker. Halina Bierenbaum was invited. She's a survivor, quite prominent in Israel. And she wanted to come. She's more than 90 years, wrote a wonderful book about hope. And then COVID came and she decided not to leave the country. Well, she wanted to talk to us to Zoom. We do tonight, Zoom webinar. Then the war started and she wrote an email that she's not able to talk anymore because all pictures coming back. She's from Warsaw and was 10 years old when the German army came in. And in a way, she's one of those survivors. I would say she worked her story totally through. I mean, a healthy person from a psychological or medical point of view, in a way, as Primo Levi and some other survivors working the history, working in history, her own history. And in a way, she's a teacher. She wrote this book. She visited often Auschwitz-Birkenau and spoke to many, yes, young people, students. But this time, first time, she said, I can't speak anymore. Hopefully it won't be the last time, but just to say that also for some of the survivors, it was unbelievable what happened weeks before we went. So I was a little bit unsure this time if it's really a good thing to do such an excursion there. And when I arrived it was 10 o'clock p.m. So at the beginning night, I arrived with the bus, and then Krzysztof, my friend, wanted to pick me up at the gate of Auschwitz. in the night. The gate is closed, of course, but it was our meeting point. And so I waited there for him, and I saw two other people there, obviously also strangers as I am, standing at the gate. And they asked the man, "What are you doing here in the night?" And he said, "You know, I came from France, from Normandy. I drove a truck." "So you drove a truck?" I said. "To Auschwitz?" "No," he said, "to the Ukraine border, full of medics. We collected medics, drugs, medical drugs from all the countryside of Normandy in France. It took 4 days, and just to bring it to Ukraine border. And now I'm on the way back home, but I realized Auschwitz-Birkenau is so close. So I stopped here and we'll see it tomorrow in the morning." I said to him, "Are you a truck driver?" And he said, "No, I'm a police officer. But there's nothing more important now than to do this." And it was so interesting to stand with this man and his wife in the night there. It was a very warm little conversation about actual needs of our time, and a deep going place to talk to somebody with a humanistic impulse, human moral impulse. He just took the truck and drove 4 days to the Ukraine border. Yes, I don't want to talk about this conflict or this war, and there are so many different aspects and also in the media, but just to say it is a very special place, Auschwitz-Birkenau. And I think some of you will know that also SteinerBooks once organized a seminar there together with me, because Jean Gallagher took the decision to publish a book about an anthroposophical victim who died in Auschwitz-Birkenau, Maria Grebel-Darmstädter. She was a Jew and an anthroposophist, and I reconstructed her personal story. And SteinerBooks, years ago, published this book. And later on, I presented the book not by Zoom, but on the place. And so it's the second presentation of a book about Auschwitz-Birkenau. Yeah, just to mention, I go there with the medical students, and the main topic is the impact of German doctors in the system of murder and selection, or selection and murdering in Auschwitz-Birkenau. German professors, even medical professors, were active there. Famous professor for gynecology who became a mass sterilizer. He tested methods of sterilizing women because Himmler wanted to diminish the population of the Eastern Europe countries, and so not to kill them all because he needed them as workers, but no growing population. So how to regulate population? This is still a very severe striving of some organizations. And at this time it was Heinrich Himmler from the SS who wanted to have efficient methods to control population. So mass sterilization tested in Auschwitz-Birkenau by Professor Karl Klauberg and others. So I talked to the students about the system, the medical system of the Nazi regime, but also about individual doctors, as this Karl Klauberg or Josef Mengele, or some other famous and not so famous persons. In a way, I try to individualize also the terror system. I think we should know about how such a system is working, and what belongs to the medical aspect, but never should forget that also personalities are involved. And especially also we study the history of the victims. I mean, 1.5 million, you can't reconstruct their stories. And the most of them, they died directly after the arrival in Auschwitz because they were deported to the gas chamber without being positively selected to the camp. So for those who don't know, Auschwitz-Birkenau was partly a concentration camp. That means a place where people were imprisoned to work, and partly it was an extermination camp. And it was both. But the doctor's role was, when the transports came, to select people, those who are still able to work in an efficient way for what the SS wanted, or those who were too old or too young, too weak, directly going to the gas chambers. And the decision was made by a doctor, not only Mengele, but also Mengele. But it was not the only role of the doctors. They also were responsible that the toxic substance, cyanide, was correctly brought to the gas chamber. And then they were also responsible that when the gas chamber was opened, that they controlled, they were all dead. So in a way, doctors who were meant to be healers were those who controlled death. And first of all, selected who should go directly to death. And I came back to the victims, 1.5 million. I said, you can't reconstruct their stories because most of them directly went to the gas chamber. But some of them were also registered into the working camp, and some of them, as Halina Birnbaum, survived. So we also go into the stories of the survivors. Give people a name and place, once said Traute Lavrens Page, another survivor, not of a concentration camp, but of the German resistance group of White Rose. And she said it, give people a name and place, many years ago in a conference in the United States in the Center for Medicine After the Holocaust. An important center, or at least an important name for a Center for Medicine After the Holocaust. So give people a name and a place. And it resound also a little bit to Yad Vashem, the memorial site in Israel. Hand and name. Yad Vashem means hand and name. It is a reference to Jesaja, the prophet. He wrote, in my house, within my walls, a hand mark, a name mark. And this is also very important for us as visitors, or also for the students, that not only 1.5 million victims, but also people with a name and also with a place where they came from, but also where they died. For those who, the relatives or the next generation, sometimes they come and want to see their father or grandfather died, and they need to know when exactly. So it's necessary quite often to know when and where, and never forget the name. In the Jewish history, but not only in the Jewish history, but extremely in the Jewish history, the name is so important for the individuality. So we study, I come back to my theme, the behavior of the German doctors, and especially their thoughts. What is behind this kind of medical system? But also to balance it in a way. After some excursions, hopefully you can still see me because I lost my own face on the screen. But I just go on with the lecture. Hopefully it's all fine. John, can you still see me?
We can hear you, but we cannot see you. Did you
Aha,
perhaps turn off your video by accident?
I'm back now, sorry, I'll try again. Should be okay, but it's not there.
The video is not there, but
No,
your
not there.
audio is working.
Yeah, I'll still try. Yes, I'm back. Okay, good. Oh, you can see me now. Good.
Very good.
Yeah. Oh, but it's the end again. I don't know. Maybe there is something a little bit here. Okay. Sorry for this. I hope it will be stable now. Good. So I reappeared. So that's good on, but vanished ago. Something is not really good here. But I try to go on. Hopefully we have some support from the other side. I said I want to balance it also for the medical students. So after some years of these excursions, I also sent it to the other side of the medical activities there. And I discovered there is an more or less unpublished history of the concentration camp. This is the history of those doctors who were prisoners and who took care for their comrades, for the other prisoners. The prisoners' doctors and the prisoners' nurses, they are not so well known in the books about Auschwitz-Birkenau, but they existed. And what they did, almost without any medical drugs and in incredible difficult conditions, this is enormous. And it was very, very good. It is always very, very good to see and to hear for the students that there was a resistance movement, not only a political one, but also a therapeutical one. I'll come back to this theme later on. So the book in general has several chapters. If you have already read it, it's clear for you. The first is about one survivor, Primo Levi, and his way. Maybe you know Primo Levi, at least the name or his books. He committed suicide later. But I would say the cause for this suicide was a depression, a long-lasting depression. But I would say not because of Auschwitz. I would say because that the society, the European society, had not drawn the real consequences of Auschwitz. In a way, he was struggling with continuity instead of turning point of time. I won't talk about Primo Levi tonight, but I think it's worth to study his biography and also his thought about medicine. I will focus tonight on the second chapter. It's about Alexander Mitscherlich. And even if you don't know the name or the man, he was the one who analyzed after the war what happened in the concentration camps and what does it mean for medicine and what kind of consequences are needed in Western societies, also Eastern, in democracies. What is the role of medicine in our time and what to learn from Auschwitz? I will talk a little bit about this. And then there are other chapters in the book or sub-chapters, but then I will come back to the students. And at the end, I will quote some of them, what they learned on this place and their own personal impression there. So I'll start with Alexander Mitscherlich. And I think his books are published in the United States of America, as I know, but I don't know if still people are reading them. So the first one appeared in 1947, The Dictate of Contempt for Humanity, the Nuremberg Doctors' Trial and its Consequences. And 2 years later, in 1949, Science Without Humanity, Medical and Eugenic Aberrations under Dictatorship, Bureaucracy and War. And I think these two books or let's say the leading thoughts in these books, they are still so essential for our time. And the last 2 years, even if there are many, many opinions about COVID and pandemia and the causes and the measures, but I think there could be a common sense or a common understanding that medicine plays an extremely important role in our societies. Medicine and science, and also policy using medical arguments or scientific arguments, aspects, or at least in informing our everyday life. So this was the astonishing thing, I think, the last 2 years for everybody, that his own personal life was so directly influenced by the government more than ever before, especially also in such countries as Switzerland or Germany, where the younger generation grew up in an atmosphere of freedom, liberty, but also this kind of economical security. A lot of them, not all of them, you could travel, you could decide what you'd want to do, but suddenly locked down. And it was totally unexpected for everybody, and out of medical reasons. And so, as you all know, the virologist and the hygiene specialists, they seem to be the one who rule the society. And I know there are many different perspectives to the same theme, and I don't want, it's no COVID evening, but in a way it became very, very clear that medicine in the society and has an enormous element, or a potential element, for directing the line. And coming back to Mitscherlich, he said, if I want to summarize, it is not only that there were some criminal medical doctors in Germany, so the lessons from Auschwitz in the field of medicine is going far beyond. It has to do with our thinking about what is a human being. It has to do with our image of human health. It has to do with what we understand about illness and therapy, but also the place of medicine in policy. And Mitscherlich was a neurologist, an academic person out of a very famous medical family, neurologist, as I said, but also very interested and gifted and also trained in psychoanalysis. At this time, there were not so many medical doctors who were also educated in psychoanalysis or psychotherapy. He was one of the pioneers. And because he was part of a political resistant group in the time of Hitler, and the American administration selected him for good positions after the war. They were looking for those German doctors and academic doctors who were not burdened by their Nazi history. So he became soon quite a famous, not only a physician, but also a kind of a medical minister, but only for a part of Germany. And then the Nuremberg trial, end of 1946, till the summer of 47, was opened, the Nuremberg trial for the doctors under Hitler. So they wanted to bring to the court those doctors who worked in the concentration camps and did these trials and made all these criminal acts. And then the American administration there wanted that the German doctors that they bring a commission to the court, that a medical commission who has the task to report to the doctors groups and to the public what happened there. So it was a kind of official mission. And Mitscherlich was the leader of this group of, at the beginning, 3-4 doctors who were witnessing the trial in Nuremberg and should report about it in the medical journals and in the public. And he liked it very much, even if the trial and the information, the details were horrible. But he said also later, he said that he had this strong inner hope at this time, also for the dawn of a new justice in the world. He was very impressed by the fairness of the Nuremberg proceedings, and the court, United States court at this time, he said there was such an objectivity. It was not that those who were the winners of the war now brought the other ones to the court, but it was really, it was not a victor's justice. It was, he said there were kind of a neutrality. They really wanted to find out what happened there. And Nuremberg is a very special city for this, because it has a long historical background till Dürer, and very famous old German city, but also for the Nazi. It was their town for the so-called Reich Party rallies. So the big assemblies, the big meetings were always in Nuremberg, and also the racial laws were decided there. So it was an important place for this trial. And in fact, it was a new development. And this trial were also a kind of a model for wonderful, or for very good new possibilities on the level of justice. Probably you know that they're, in a way, introduce a new criminal category, crimes against humanity. They did not exist before, the terminus crimes against humanity. So from an anthroposophical point of view, we could say in the Michaelic age, humanity is becoming a new achievement, and that also criminal acts against humanity, and not only against a country, are under persecution, under observation. For Mitscherlich, it was the dawn of a new time. And he wrote in a letter in 1946 to his mother, "It is a step towards human consciousness, towards responsibility before mankind, which is aimed at here." I really want to underline this, because in a way, it seems that many of these positive developments, they are gone. In a way, there was hope after 45, 46, 47 in the last century, and then it was a little bit blocked. I come to this point also in Germany, but later in the 70s, in the 80s, there were important developments. But what we see the last years, or maybe the last 2 decades, it seems to go backward, also on the level of human consciousness, and also on the level of what is our crimes against humanity. And maybe also I should remind that the chief prosecutor of the Nuremberg main trial, not only against the doctors, but also against the main war criminals, Robert Jackson, probably you know the name. He opened the trial there saying, "The misdeeds we seek to condemn and punish were so sophisticated, so evil, and of such devastating effect that human civilization cannot tolerate, leaving them unattended, for it would not survive a repetition of it. So we won't survive a repetition. It must be unique. And if not, it will be the end of Earth development in a way. So just to mention that there was a kind of hope after 45, 46, after this abyss. It was the deepest point of humanity on Earth. And Mitscherlich believed in a new epoch of medicine, to understand that the system was wrong. I mean, for him, it was not a new discovery, because he was a doctor since many years, and he was quite critical about not natural science, but a medicine who identified itself as practical natural science, and only this. So therefore, he became also not only a neurologist, but also a psychotherapist. I come back to that point. Interestingly, that even if he had the official mission to report about the ongoing trial, he had no chance to bring in his reports in the official German medical journals. They didn't accept his reports, because they said, no, we are only scientific medical journals, and what happened there in the trial, this is not part of our job. So at the end, he had no chance to bring his observations and the details to the group of the doctors, to the physician groups in Germany. And he started to write in other big newspapers, especially also in Switzerland, Zurich. And he described, in observing the trial, that he described the strategies of the defense. No one responsible was responsible. So the doctors only did what Himmler said. So this kind of delegation of responsibility. But also he described in the journals that they justify what they did. So these horrifying human or unhuman experiments in the concentration camps, the lawyers said of the doctors, yes, they were unavoidable and medical almost commonplace. And it was the need of the time and the need of the war, and there was no sign of empathy and compassion. He also described in the newspapers at this early time that it was not only the SS and some Mengeles, but a lot was known in the German army, and also a lot was known in the German universities. So the medical professors, part of them, they knew what was this kind of research in the concentration camps, and they were partly involved. Some of the professors worked or did experiments, as I said, Professor Klauberg, and other ones, they had their co-workers there. So there was a kind of benefit for the German science, and which was at this time very famous. The most Nobel Prizes went to Germany. But then he lost his tolerance, and because the medical newspapers still did not accept his reports, he published a little booklet. It was not so thin, and he let it print in 25,000 copies, and just brought it out to the public. This was the dictate of contempt for humanity, the Nuremberg doctors' trial and its consequences. And this was a shock. This was a shock for the medical profession, that Mitscherlich, without having the right, because in a way he was there as a representative for the German Doctors Association, but he brought this to the printer without asking the chiefs, because he said, now I have to do something, and he just brought it. And he was not writing about some isolated criminal doctors, but also about the system of medicine, the history of science, which accommodated very well to this dictatorship regime. And he argued in saying that this kind of medical system, with his reductionist style, that a human being is only a kind of a natural object, a functioning or non-functioning brain, without soul, without spirit. And then you can discuss, or they discussed, if it's a positive racial element or negative. So ignoring the entity of what is a human being. And this made this medicine so compliant, he said, to the pseudo-scientific and political ideological system of indoctrination. He wrote in his book, in his first book, together with another co-author, a student of him, they published it together, the book. Karl Brandt, one of the professors, he was the leading doctor of Hitler, and he spoke in Nuremberg. Karl Brandt speaks elsewhere of the overriding state interest to which the physician must submit. This tragically confuses the physician's bond with society, with the people who approach him in need of help, with obedience to absolute state power. Increasingly, the original relationship of trust between doctor and patient is overshadowed by non-medical aspects. It seems to become exactly the same for the future, whether the dictate of contempt for humanity takes its starting point from bureaucratic indifference or ideological aggressiveness. So in a way, he was previewing a time where maybe there's no Hitler, but also a system, a bureaucratic system, or a system of controlling people with medical arguments. And there was no resistance movement of the doctors instead. When the book came out, which described first time all these criminal acts performed in these concentration camps by doctors, not only the selections and the gas chambers, but also they tested drugs there, and they made cruel experiments with the prisoners. I don't want to describe the details. I mentioned the mass sterilization, but there were many, many other horrible experiments with the prisoners in the name of science, in the name of politics. When he published it together with his interpretation, there was a total block of the German physicians group. They blamed him more or less, saying that he's damaging their medical reputation. And if he wants to research those things, it could only be for the doctors group, not to the public. But he said, yes, this is one of the tragedy that you think that the medical affairs belong to you, but it is a right of everybody to know about this. The German doctors and the leading German professors at this time, they want to restore normality as soon as possible. And they say there were some individual manglers, but has nothing to do with German science and with the German medical profession. Maybe 50 mad psychopathological manglers, but all the rest of the 70,000 German doctors had nothing to do with it. Nowadays, we know that 50% of all German doctors were members of Hitler's party, and that the medical profession was, together with the lawyers, the most important profession for Hitler to incarnate his biological social Darwinism system. He needed the doctors. in an understanding of health, which is an understanding of selection and the survival of the fittest. And then you need doctors and medical arguments. And we should never forget that Hitler said that the Jews, they are a virus problem. In a way, it was hygiene, what he said. We need to clean the body of our nation from the virus. So virology was a main argument for Hitler and his followers. They used a lot of medical arguments saying the Jews, they have genes, inheritance, which creates illness in the country. So genetically, they are all ill. So if we want to save the people, we must eliminate them. So they used medical arguments in cleaning the society. If I said that 50% of the German doctors were members of Hitler's party, they had not all the same conviction. Some of them only adopted to the system. They didn't want to irritate their career. They were not all active party members, but passive at least. But at least there was no resistance group. And in fact, there was no medical resistance group. And now when Mitscherlich brought this theme to the public, there was this kind of front. They want to bring him to the justice. And they want the University of Heidelberg to drop him out because he had an academic position there. They did not succeed to drop him out of university, but he never became a professor, even if he has this habilitation. So his career was partly stopped. Later on, he made a career, but also only in psychotherapy, and especially in America. He had one good supporter. This was Professor Victor von Weizsäcker, his main teacher. Victor von Weizsäcker wrote a wonderful essay in 1947 about euthanasia and human experimentation. And he said in this essay, Weizsäcker, there can really be no doubt that the moral anesthesia toward the suffering of those chosen for euthanasia and experimentation was favored by the mindset of a medicine that regards man as if he were a chemical molecule or a frog or a guinea pig. So he was discussing that all these medical doctors were trained at university, trained in that a human being is nothing more than a physical body and comparable to a frog or a guinea pig. And at this time, it's really true that the medical students, they worked a lot in this animal laboratory at the university and doing experiments with the animals instead of listening to the sick in the sick bed. So they were trained in medicine as practical natural science, experimentation, and he said, Weizsäcker, this has a consequence for the moral inner attitude of those. So we have to deal with the medicine. And then Weizsäcker wrote, the invisible spirit sitting in the dock at Nuremberg, the spirit that takes man only as an object, is not only in play at Nuremberg, it permeates the whole world in finely distributed form. So this is the materialistic approach to medicine and social Darwinism and all the consequences. And the consequences are also euthanasia, murdering sick people, or making selection what is the life we want to have on earth and the other one. And finishing the chapter of Mitscherlich, because we are approaching midnight here, not in the United States. For Mitscherlich, it was not only reviewing the past, but previewing the future, because money, industry, and administration, observation, systematical control of population. This is ongoing. And medicine is a factor in this system. And he said, it's not, we have not overcome the thinking of selection. We have not overcome the abuse of science and technique. And this so-called value-free natural science is an illusion. And this is the end of medicine as a humanistic field if we define medicine as practical natural science, because a human being is not only nature. Coming out of the class lessons, we can say, yes, in the realm of nature, you will never find the human I, the individuality. It is so we need natural science in medicine, but we need also the science of soul, and we need spiritual science. And if we have only a natural scientific-based medicine, it is ignoring the humanistic element of medicine, but then it became also dangerous in such a system. In Goethe's time, a doctor who also partly treated Goethe himself, his name is Wilhelm Hufeland, he lived in Weimar. He published wonderful sentences in 1806. So more than 1.5 centuries before Hitler came, Hufeland said the physician should and may do anything, may do nothing, sorry. The physician should and may do nothing other than preserve life, whether if it is a good or bad fortune, whether it has value or not. This is not his concern as a physician. And if he once presumes to include these considerations in his profession, the consequences are incalculable, and the physician becomes the most dangerous person in the state. For once the line has been crossed, once the physician believes himself justified in deciding on the necessity of a life, only gradual progressions are needed to apply the unworthiness and consequently the uselessness of a human life to other cases as well. In the 20th century, it was Hannah Arendt who exactly dealt with this one, the uselessness of human life, the so-called uselessness. So Hufeland, and he's also saying the most dangerous person in the state can be the doctor. If he undertakes this, if he doing this, judging the unworthy and the worthy life on earth. I'm leaving Mitscherlich. I want to end with the students and some general thoughts. In a way, it was hope in the book of Mitscherlich. And in 47 and in 49, when they were published, they were not well received by the, as I mentioned, by the Association of Doctors, and also not by the German academic world. In a way, Germany treated Hitler as an episode, a dark episode of German history, but it was only the Nazis. So not we, but the Nazis. So in a way, they separated from it, leaving it behind, mistake of history, but let's go on. And as you all know, they were quite successful in restoring the country, economy, and the Western civilization, the big help of United States of America and the NATO. And so Germany came again to power, and this sad story with these 12 years from 1933 to 1945, let's forget. When I was young at school, there was a very famous Bavarian politician, Franz Josef Strauß. He wanted to become chancellor as Angela Merkel, but before her. And he once said, a nation as Germany, who succeeded economically so wonderful, has a right to hear nothing anymore from this old time. So in a way, we overcame it by prosperity. But then the late 60s and the 70s came, and the young generation came, and they asked her parents what happened there in this so-called dark period. And they asked at universities, were the doctors not involved and the scientists? And then they started a real movement in the 70s, 80s in this Western society, and also then in medical history, to research what really happened. And now we have many, many, many books about the involvement of science or leading scientists, their interests, the economy. So Mitscherlich became a prominent author, but he was already dead. But in a way, it remained to be historical. So there is no field of medicine, history of medicine, which is so well researched than these 12 years. So many books, but it's all history. In a way, I did not come across many books who ever touched the question if the image of man behind this system, is it not going on? And not so many books about the impact of industrial economical interests, which are going on in the world. So the role of medicine under dictatorship is wonderfully analyzed, but the role of medicine in democratic states, but also ruled partly by economy and supranational interests and organizations, is not really described. So Mitscherlich is now really rehabilitated as a researcher of medicine under dictatorship, but what he really wants to have was a kind of revolution in medicine, a new anthropology, a new image of man, a new importance of relationship to the patient. And now we have psychotherapy, and we have complementary medicine. We have also a little bit of anthroposophical medicine. But all in all, I would say the big factors, the big players, is the chemical industry or the vaccination industry and other leading, together with administration and surveillance. And now we know that in the digitalized epoch, there are very clever methods in knowing how people are medically treated, or how many of them are vaccinated, and we can more and more digitalize, and everybody can be clearly be known from a medical point of view. In the future, we don't know if the dignity of our physical body, or also the privacy of our physical body, is, if we have a right for this privacy, or if we are approaching a time where it's said it's not your own, because there are more than individual interests. What to do in such a situation? And my personal conviction was since years that we can publish books about it. And it's good that SteinerBooks published this book. But we won't change the world with books. And how to change the power? We also feel helpless. We felt helpless in the former times, and we feel helpless now. And so I came to this maybe a little bit not so enthusiastic solution, that I think it's good to go with medical students that they really see, not only as a lesson at university about medicine under dictatorship, but to go to see, to go to the place, to feel, to be there, and to perceive it there, to hear the stories there, to be on the ground. And now time is over, but maybe only some of the reports, which is deeply moving, but you are able to read for your own. At the end of the book, what they wrote, the students, and we motivated them to write down their experiences. What kind of waking up happened there during those 4 days? And they went there naive from the first, second semester studying medicine, and they came back quite reflective and not shocked, but awakened in a way. One student is writing, the whole healthcare system, the system of doctors has become a shadow for me. The lobby of the doctors, which is still there today. The fact that the power of certain professional groups and interests can so abuse the trust placed in them by the population should be a lesson to us. And here, from my point of view, it is not the individual who is the problem, because probably our generation would not have acted differently back then. It is a question of the system, and we should always take a critical look at this system. We should discuss it. But some also very, very, very individual, deeply going inside self-reflections. And one student said she gained vigilance and courage there. I set myself the goal that I would take away some civil courage from this excursion. The uprightness. It's interesting that on a place which is so destroying, destructive, so negative, that the uprightness of the medical students, they grew over the 4 days. There was a first day of depression, a second day, but then there was a kind of resurrection inwardly. And very important was to show them the resistance movement. And those doctors who served their comrades. And if this is existing there, the students said, under such bad conditions, we could do it ourselves, wherever we work, in a hospital or private. One student wrote, Pia Marie Hartmann, I thought I would return home from this trip shaken. I took all possible precautions to be able to arrive back well rested. I feel now strong and full of ideas, full of inspiration and inner strength, full of will and motivation for change, even full of joy for the beauty of the world. I'm grateful for the friendship, our opportunities for reflection, and feel I have been reminded of something important, reminded of what is a human being on earth. Another one wrote, when I came home, a different person entered the apartment who had left it 5 days before. One student once said to me, you know, doctor, all my problems, my pre-existing problems are solved. So that what I regarded as problems before, I always feel that they awaken for humanity, for what is a human being. They have not a solution, but the response is so clear. We can teach them anthroposophy and saying what is a human being from the perspective of Steiner, an interesting lesson. But to be there on such a place of evil, I have sometimes the feeling that if they are good guided, it is kind of a counter color, an opposite color is coming. And especially if they are not alone, we are there as a group and we need this group. We help each other, but then in a way we confront evil, but we have to stand. But then there is an opposite color coming into this in the soul. And in a way, I think it's good to go to such dark places on earth, but you must know how to do it. And it should not be touristic. And I have not the answer for solving the problem of medicine in society, and I think we can't solve the problem isolated. I think we all know that we need a kind of threefoldness, and that medicine is not free at all in our time. It is absolutely dependent on economy and on politics. And to free medicine would be one of the most important value. In fact, medicine belongs more or less to the free spiritual life, because it has to do with the value of what is a human being. It has to do with biographies. It has to do with a kind of destiny level. Of course, it uses natural science, but as medicine, as an art, I would say it's belonging to what Dr. Steiner called freies Geistesleben, so free spiritual life. But in our days, it is not at all free. And how to free medicine, this is a challenge we can't solve at the moment, at least. But I always think that if the students see this early in their kind of education, it has an effect. And I sometimes meet them again later on, and I see this was one of the most important times of their early medical training years. And it's so interesting that what is growing is the will to heal. So they're going back. Some of them always said to me, now I know why I want to become a doctor. I did not know it really before. And it is in a way crazy and absurd that you have to go to Auschwitz-Birkenau to understand deeper why you want to become a healer. But from a spiritual point of view or an anthroposophical point of view, I think it is not so strange. Yeah. I want to end with a verse Dr. Steiner gave to Ita Wegman. Has to do with the theme and this Friday. I hope I could give you at least a kind of an impression of the book. Of course, the books are the books, and how to change the reality, this is the major challenge. And I think we all feel and felt since many years, but the last 2 years were extremely difficult. And now the actual developments are also not very positive in the world. How to change these kind of Ahrimanic traits. But in a way, I would also say, if in the students, in ourselves, is awakening a Christian impulse against Ahriman, I would say it has to do with the leading thoughts. When Dr. Steiner saying, together with Michael, you can approach Ahriman and you will find a way to Christ. What I try with these kind of excursions is, in a way, this. And this Krzysztof Antonczyk has partly the role of a guardian, of a kind of a threshold, and has an aspect of a Michaelic personality in all his modesty and being very humble. But we guide and we accompany the students, and we are also students, and we'll find a way to the Christian impulse in the middle of destruction. So at least I would say we are on the line of the leading thoughts. We are not those who have a concept of how to transform society at the moment, but working with individuals, I would say it is a path. And these could eventually also be thoughts on such a day, Eastern, approaching Easter Sunday, Good Friday, Golgotha Day in this year 22. So the finishing verse, maybe first in German, just to hear the language, but of course I will end in your language. But I think it would be worth to hear it one time in German and then in English, and yeah, and so we will end. I don't know about question, John Scott, but first the verse and then we'll see. In German, Dr. Steiner wrote for Ite Wegmann, da, wo das Licht vor grünen Dämonen erzittert und die lichtgeborenen Urweltkräfte den ringenden Menschen die Rätsel verkünden, die den Dämonen nur von Menschen entlockt und zu Göttern gebracht werden können, fand Seele die Seele, um der einst wartenden Göttern Dämonengeheimnis zu opfern, an finsterer Stätte. Das Licht werde, wo ohne dieses Tun ewige Finsternis waltete. Solche Stelle gibt es. Sie muss verschwinden. Machet der einst sie verschwinden. So spricht mahnend Michaels Blick. Just to say, it's a verse about dark spots on earth where we have to bring the light. And Michael's gaze is clearly saying or showing to us that we have to transform these places, demonic places. And with the problem with the demons is there's the hierarchies don't know about the demons. Human beings have the task to find out the secrets of the demons. There is a dimension of evil on earth we have to find out. And then the hierarchies can support us in fighting for the good. But we have to discover evil. And Auschwitz-Birkenau, but not only, this is, from my perspective, such a place. There, where the light trembles before green demons, and the light born, originating forces proclaim to the seeker the riddles which only human beings can wrest from demons and bring to God's soul, found soul, to make sacrifice and offering to God's waiting in the future of demon secrets at the place of darkness, so that light might grow where, without this deed, eternal darkness would hold sway. Such a place exists. It must vanish. Make it one day vanish. So speaks, admonishing, Michael's gaze. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter. I know that it's we've gone over a little bit and it's after midnight. So thank you for this gift of your talk. And I believe we won't have, we won't engage in the conversation, but we will leave it at that.
Good.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. And we wish you the best for the rest of this weekend. And be in touch. Thank you, Peter.
Good Easter time for all of you. Good Easter time. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.